Hello and welcome to Meet Me at the Movies Open Dialogue. We're so glad that you could join us here today. However you decide to tune in and spend time with us, we do enjoy our opportunities to talk to filmmakers, and very happy to have Peter and Ian with us today talking about the film Rising Phoenix. They are no stranger to documentaries. They received BAFTA nominations for the film McQueen, which was also critically acclaimed. Your work together is marvelous. Before we went on the air, I was telling you how much I appreciate what you do, and I am a lover of documentary, and a lover of film, and a lover of good story. And you guys find a way to make that happen. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your work.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Well, let's talk about this story. It's an extraordinary story about the Paralympics, the history of it, the people behind it, and the people who are involved in it. Why was this important for you to tell? And Peter, I'll start with you, and then we'll move on to Ian.
Gosh, well, you know, we finished McQueen, and it was the first time that we worked together properly, and it was a great experience for us. And we decided we wanted to do something else, so we were casting around for a subject, and the Paralympics found us via the project's producers, John Batsek and Greg Nugent. Greg had been the director of marketing of London 2012. So he was already very intimate with the project and had a sort of fiery vision to make this film. So we all met, and the project just spoke to us immediately. There are so many elements, and I know I'll forget a couple, so Ian will pick up. But I think, you know, we were blown away by the origin story of the Paralympics. You know, this Jewish neurologist in Nazi Germany who had eventually been forced into exile, running away from the Nazis, who had him, you know, he was of keen interest to them because of his subversive activities in Germany, trying to protect people during the Kristallnacht. And so eventually he wound up in England, and he found that soldiers returning from, for example, the D-Day landings, were not given any real care or rehabilitation to recover from paraplegia, from paralysis. And he thought that was totally wrong, that they were just being left on the human scrap heap, effectively to die with a little bit of palliative care. And he decided that he was going to care for them properly, rehabilitate them into society, and sport became the kind of like the catalyst for that, really, and then became a thing in and of itself. And that's where the dream of having the Paralympic Games in parallel to the Olympics started. So yeah, we loved that. We knew nothing of that story, and we thought, God, you know, it has two things immediately. You know, there was a sense of it being a sports story, yes, but also a human rights story, which was just, yeah, I think speaks to everyone, really. And the sports story, you know, we already knew we were inspired by that because we both had been around during London 2012, right. And we knew what an extraordinary event that was, and something about the sort of the heroism of the athletes, you know, which was celebrated in a brilliant piece of filmmaking called Meet the Superhumans, that was sort of the prelude for the games. Sorry, I'm going on at too great length. As Ian said, we talk way too much. But I think that those two things together, Gutman's story and the story of some of the contemporary athletes, those were things that immediately spoke to us, and we just kind of like, we were all in sort of immediately and very determined to make the film.
That would have been enough as an answer, Peter.
Yeah.
There you go.
I apologize again.
So when you take on projects, is it different with each project? Because this one came to you. Do you find yourself sometimes seeking out projects that you both had this interest in, or does it differ from piece to piece? Because this one, as you said, did come to you. And Ian, I'll let you chime in on this.
Yeah, there's no rules really. Peter kind of detailed exactly what got us attracted to Rising Phoenix, to the Paralympic movement, but it's exactly that. It's mainly stories, and the ability to tell, to bring emotions out. Is there a scope? Can we do something interesting visually? We do tend to look at things which have got a bit of an international appeal. Somehow, though it's not always the case. So yeah, every project differ, and some are originated by us. For instance, the McQueen project was led by us with another production company. Literally, it wasn't like people approach us. We literally, started from scratch and financed it, brought it to life, and got the distribution going. So it really depends. But I think what we tend to try to do, we call them movie docs. So we try to go to do those big scale docs. We're a massive fan of doc and those little gems of doc where someone suddenly stumble upon a story and spent maybe years filming it. We tend to take a more not looking back approach, that'd be wrong, but we're not observational documentary makers. We wouldn't spend like years observing something. We do like working with archive and creating, very cinematic, high scale imagery. So that's why actually maybe we're starting to find a bit of a style and a bit of a voice of our own. I think there's a very strong narrative strand, a very strong emotional strand as well, and then the visual needs to feel like a feast. So a subject matter need to lend itself in trying to create special visuals.
Well, you nailed it for me, because there were several things that were standouts for this film, Rising Phoenix, for me. Of course, the story itself, the narrative, and the messages relating to perseverance and strength, those are all really strong. But also the cinematography was absolutely magnificent, and the score, those combined really tied into getting the subject, especially the athletes, to fill in those gaps. Talk a little bit about those technical aspects of bringing that to life. As you said, that almost theatrical scope and that feel, that it is grand, much like the Olympics and the Paralympics itself. Your documentary exhibited that quite well.
Well, I think that one thing we felt very strongly right from the beginning is that in terms of visual presentations, the Paralympians have never had the opportunities that Olympians or other athletes have. They're never presented, very rarely presented in fantastic commercials, or rarely in films where their beauty and their strength is and their grit is really showcased. So we felt we wanted to kind of like, we wanted to, on one hand, humanize them so that people would see past whatever the disability was. But on the other hand, we also wanted to kind of like put them on a pedestal, really, and give them, address that sort of, that absence. So we did that, obviously, and I'm talking a little bit for Ian, because Ian often leads the visuals brilliantly. And I'll say that for you so you don't have to say it. But, there was immediately this idea of classical statues, which it was just a great way of sort of helping to put them on a pedestal, and using that both for our titles and then for interstitial imagery. We did something similar with McQueen, but here it was very specific to the idea of the classical athlete. And then also the movie moments, as we called them, where we would sort of like look at the stories of the athletes, and we'd sort of think, we try and come up with visuals that would reflect not just the element, of their sport. It might be, the sky, the air that Jean-Baptiste long jumps through. It might be the water, or it might be, we thought about those things, but we also tried to come up with imagery that somehow had a resonance with their personal stories. So that was very key for us. And then on the music front, well, we both we have different tastes in music, but we both absolutely adore music. And for us, one of the high points of making McQueen was working with Michael Nyman's library and working with him, but also working with his archive effectively, and building a soundscape just with his music. And you know, we felt that was important because there's so many different fragmentary elements in documentary that, you know, it's great to have one sound world by one composer that kind of like brings everything together. And what we felt when we started this film is it would be great to do that again, but actually to work on an original score with a composer. We both love Daniel Pemberton. He's an extraordinary, but he started in documentary, but of course he's now working mainly on big studio films. So we had to work very, very hard to persuade him that he should come and work with us on this tiny little documentary. And that was a fantastic process working with him, and he engaged with it, you know, from we hadn't finished shooting when he was starting to actually write some of the cues based on the material that he'd seen.
That is such a fascinating process, and I always like to applaud those behind the scenes.
So do we,
because it's filmmaking is very much a puzzle come together by various pieces, and they have to fit together just right to have that fullness, and that truly did happen here in Rising Phoenix. So I always like to give shout outs and celebrate those everyone who makes.
So maybe we should just mention that at GOP Will Pugh, which actually we worked on McQueen as well, and even just, you know, for us to work the way we should the interviews, we tend to keep it simple, you know, and cinematic, you know, a big wide shot to get a sense of who the person is, and you know, and being able to somehow keep a bit of a breather, and then a really tight close-up, which is a very cinematic way of filming. We tend, I mean, documentaries and different angles can be cinematic, and they can be cinematic in film, but then we're a bit worried it might take the viewer out. You know, the pureness of Asif Kapadia's work of just using the voice and archive, we try to do that in this sort of hypnotic way that let's say our interviews are either like this or like that. And then
tight, close, and wide for those who can't see.
And then the guys who did the sculpture, Timeless Arts, is a great CGI studio, FX studio in London. We've done our skulls on McQueen, and we carried on working with them. But you're right, you know, you can have ideas, you can have wishes, but you know, you will always fall short if you don't work with people that excel in their fields, and actually sometimes even pushes you and come up with the ideas. Some of the ideas, I mean, we tend to brainstorm, you know, that's the great thing of being a team. We brainstorm ideas, so we tend to go into you know, Peter was way too kind to give me credits, but we tend to brainstorm together, and then we go and we can talk to the different departments, knowing what we want. You know, in music, we would talk, and I mean, the great thing with Nyman and McQueen, we had the track, so we could almost find the track that would give us the emotion.
Right.
But the way we work with Daniel is that he would already compose certain things for certain areas, and our editor, another amazing collaborator, Otto Bonham, would come up with, you know, would create some great visuals, because sometimes we'd be shooting some other stuff and we would just hand him the interview, and we always created almost like a scene and almost a mini movie for each of our characters, and he would try to almost his own interpretation of our visual language and our editing pace and sonic space, and he would, you know, we would leave him a bit of time to experiment with that, and then he would send us something, would brainstorm, and that, as pieces of puzzle, you said, that's almost the way we composed the film and we created the film. Is different section of the film. We knew we would have the origin story, which Peter explained very well at the beginning, but we were worried that if we were just playing it just linearly, it'd be a long time in black and white. and we were making a contemporary film with an element of flashback. So we just used some of the, you know, fiction storytelling of flashback, flash forwards, interludes, and going into, you know, like a theme leading you into a theme, like someone, you know, opening a door and suddenly you have like a cut into another door. We use cut as you. We filmmakers, documentary makers are not documentary makers, and there's filmmakers. We're all filmmakers.
Yes.
It's just a slight different, you know, people who do comedy very well can't do horror. People who do action sequences might not be able to do a very simple and naturalistic drama. We tend to try to want to mix up, but it's always led by emotion, visual, and narrative.
At its best, I think film or any art form that allows itself to be collaborative can grow, whether it's collaborative with other artists or the audience, and or the subjects as well. Talk about your collaboration as writers, directors, creators. How does your process work together, the two of you?
It's a bit mental. It works very well because, you know, we're quite different.
I can't spell.
Sorry?
I can't spell. That starts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's true to say that although we are both interested in everything, I probably think more in terms of words and narrative structures, and I think that's just my background. Whereas Ian, whose background is more short form, is intensely visual, and those two things really come together. We complement each other, and we both have a keen interest in what the other one is doing. And so I would say that, you know, whereas on McQueen there was a kind of a differentiation between the roles, at least in the credits. With this, we just kind of thought we're doing everything together, and I think we both, you know, we both share also. I don't want to say we're good people, that sounds so crass, but we really believe in treating everyone that works with us well. And that's not always the case in filmmaking. It can be a dog eats dog industry.
Right.
But I think we share certain values about not just about the film, the film, but also the filmmakers and the world beyond the film.
We're very family people. We're very, very family. And I think the filmmaking family becomes a family, and we tend to, yeah, as Peter said, we tend to treat people a certain way. But I think as well, we took documentary from another route, isn't it, Peter? You come, as you rightly said, so producing and writing and the fiction things. I come from the short form, but I had never done doc, though I was part of a company. Paul's Film was doing huge amount of music doc, but none of the doc. I felt those movie doc were, and it's wrong what I'm going to say, but they were that was my feeling sometimes, that they were glorified music videos sometimes, you know, there was, you know, and with McQueen, we didn't want to make a glorified fashion film. You see what I mean? There would be some elements of that, but we really wanted to dig into the characters, the psychology of someone, and not shy away from the darkness. And I think what we do is, you know, with Rising Phoenix, the subject matter was really interesting. And as Peter said, those, you know, a lot of para-athletes hadn't been portrayed visually much, or never as those kick-ass athletes and elite people that they are. And people hadn't really think about how they could be represented, you know, and in a way, Peter and I were like a bit punk about it. It's like, let's represent them as the best of their abilities, and just let's, you know, if there's the murder ball, wheelchair rugby, the chair is amazing. It's got this rusty, beaten down, Mad Max, all you know, destructive sort of element to it. So how can we embrace that visually in the story? Though Riley has got a lot of amazing, very sensitive and human archive of him when he was a little kid, and it's very tender. He's a bit of a punk, you know, skateboard kid, you know, typical kid of the 90s type thing, but at the same time we just wanted to juxtapose things. So, and then we just brainstorm sound, visions, and you know, isn't it, Peter? Sometimes we said, why don't we use this shot upside down? You know, when we go to there's no rules in filmmaking, and documentary
Yeah.
is the perfect medium to actually break them all.
Yes.
Exactly. I think, you know, it's, I mean, you know, Ian and I both worked in fiction filmmaking, and I find that there's a certain sort of, like, there are limitations. You know, there's 3-act structure, and everyone refers to it, whether they like to or not. It seems to be sort of, and it's a bit of a tyrant. And there's also a particular sort of, you know, way of technically approaching the way that a story unfolds, and all of that gets blown away by in documentary, because you can do anything. You can use sound, you can use archive, you can use originally filmed sequences, you can put them together in a way that, you know, makes complete sense for that particular film, but you would never do it for anything else. And that's very, very exciting. And I think, you know, I mean, Ian said that I did come to documentary slightly earlier than he did, because I worked as a writer on a couple of documentaries, including one about Marlon Brando, where we'd been very experimental in how we used Marlon's voice,
Right.
and that just opened my eyes to the possibilities of documentary filmmaking, and I suppose there's that I kind of like feel that doc is often regarded as the kind of misfit, inferior brother of or sister of proper narrative-led filmmaking, and it's a scrappy medium, and I think that appeals to us both, and we just love.
So be it, it's the scrappy misfits.
Yeah, exactly. We are. Ian's company is called Misfits, and yeah, we don't feel that we necessarily sort of fit in, and we love that about documentary, that you can sort of like reinvent the medium, you know, with each film that you do, in a way that maybe is not so easy with fiction filmmaking.
I think as well, you know, a lot of filmmakers express themselves through other people, meaning the actors, and which is great. And you know, we are looking into fiction as well, and we're interested in fiction because I think, you know, creative mind shouldn't be put in boxes, but there's something pure in the fact that actually your actor is the person themselves you're telling the story. You know, I did really enjoy a movie called I, Tonya with Margot Robbie, but I always find quite crazy that they refilm the exact documentary interviews, and then in the title sequence they actually put them in to say, look guys, we casted well, they look really alike. And I was, do you know what? Personally, I thought it would have been really interesting that you had Margot Robbie in it, because you need the money and she's a brilliant actress, etc., etc. But why didn't you actually cut to the real people? It would have been interesting. Then it would have been a bit of the you know, the American Animal kind of thing. But then they still use it at the end. I thought, as Peter said, I think there is an element of, I think less in the US though. I think over our journey with McQueen and Rising Phoenix, I am really blown away that actually the US is, if a movie touch an audience and many people within our industry with the right emotion, and you get the right, all those sensorial reaction to something, people tend to be like, I don't care what it was. I don't care it was an horror. I don't care it was low budget and stuff like that. And I think LA and the US, maybe New York, the industry in general is more capable. I think in the UK and in Europe, especially the French do not value the documentary that much because it's a TV thing and they've got such a brilliant industry. I think it's moving up a little bit, but you know, the UK had a bigger sort of history of the documentary, but I think the last 5 to 10 years, it's the age of the documentary. People like it or not, you know, having the Peter Jackson, the Ron Howard, the Martin Scorsese, 10, 15 years ago, none of them would have thought they would be making a documentary. And then all of a sudden, all of them feel like, oh, I quite fancy a documentary. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You mentioned the journey, and it truly is a journey every time you take on a project, no matter what that project is. And I think anytime I've taken on projects, whatever that may be, I've always learned something. And sometimes I learned something about myself, emotionally or intellectually, or sometimes I learned something about the subject matter or my interpretation or my engagement within that. What are the things, or what is something that you felt you learned from this journey of
Oh
creating
my
Rising
God.
Phoenix?
I mean, that's a great question, because I think we both felt it was pretty transformative. I mean, you know, when you meet someone like any of our Paralympians, I don't even want to single anyone out, but they are all exceptional people. They've had the most extraordinary lives, you know, sometimes touched by great tragedy and huge challenges. And not only have they kind of like sort of overcome those challenges and those traumas, they have just emerged as, you know, as kind of wonderful people and communicators and people who, you know, kind of want to inspire with their example. They all hate the word inspire, by the way, but they do. They just naturally do. They you know, they want to get the message across that this isn't disability sports. I mean,
Right.
you know, as Ian was saying before, it's about ability, not disability.
Right.
And that's very true. And I think that our meetings with those people and our journey with this exceptional group of Paralympians was something that I will remember for the rest of my life, certainly. And then also, you know, the other thing is that we decided, I mean, we are both people, neither Ian nor I have disabilities. And so we were very determined, as were the producers, at the beginning of the process to bring in people with disabilities on the other side of the camera, not as a token gesture, but just as we felt, you know, we're going to learn from them, and they're, you know, having them on board is going to help us make something that is more authentic and true, and even in just the language that we use in interviews, whatever
And
it
it was
is.
the perfect project to break that barrier. You know, we having those many conversations within the film industry about gender equality, getting all of the voices from all of this, you know, in different European countries, as well as you guys in the United States of America. You know, the white male heterosexual voice is way overheard amongst, you know, it doesn't mean it can't be heard again. It doesn't mean that, you know, there's only bad thing, but it's about bringing other voices through, and people, you know, anyone with a disability is screaming to be heard. And it's really interesting every time you actually work with someone with disability. It's always the thing of like, oh, positive discrimination. I'm here because I've got a disability. Everyone wants to be where they are because they're good at what they do. They want to be given a chance. And I don't think being given a chance called positive discrimination. It's actually just being given a chance to prove yourself. Because even if you're not never giving that chance, it's not even positive discrimination, because there's no chance given. And within a society all over the world, and that was really interesting because you see parallels from Africa to Asia to, you know, the Northern Hemisphere to the Americas. People with disability are looked down upon, and they're at the bottom of the ladder, you know, and it's got nothing to do with the skin color, with your gender, you sexual orientation and stuff. You're disabled, you're at the bottom. And we found an extremely strong, beautiful, powerful community, which, because everyone shot on us, pardon my French, we'll just stick together and we'll try to raise. And I think what Peter said, it was transformative and it was really interesting. And then suddenly you start paying more attention, you know, when you go on a recce with someone in a wheelchair, you start paying more attention to how that person is going to get into a building, how that person moves around. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, I'm such a fucking selfish idiot. Do you see what I mean? Because, oh, I've got 2 legs. And again, a chair is not restrictive. It's a different mean of transportation than 2 legs. No biggie. It's just, let's give to people who use this mean of transportation the way to get somewhere the same way when you have 2 legs. We put stairs. We don't have straight walls anymore. that invention wasn't the most, the pharaohs did it, so we just have to put ramps. It sounds simple what I said, maybe a bit pretentious, but actually it's not. And we saw with the Paralympic movement, they transform people, the hearts of people when they see the technical or the sporting achievement, but they force in a really punkish way, which I love, and all, we've got it in the film, all the leaders constantly say they force society, entire countries and city to rethink their urbanization, to rethink the way they should approach things. You want, the Black Lives Matter movement touches huge amount of people because it's a powerful movement. Disabled civil rights movement can be as powerful, and it's been proven in the film for the US, and the Paralympic movement does that every year. It's just not one moment of changing a law. It's changing cities by beating them down to change them every time they go into a city.
And attitudes, and I mean, I think one of the I remember, the final day of our final mix, we came out of lockdown. We did a lot of our post-production in lockdown, and we came out and we did our final mix.
Lockdown 26 before the 29th one.
Exactly. And there was our mixer who was, I mean, we didn't mention the sound, but the work on the soundscape generally is just so fabulous in this film, and that's really down to this very innovative company called String and Tins. They're fantastic. Anyway, one of them just sort of like got to the end of the film and said, "I'm never going to think about disability and people with disability in the same way again." And that's exactly why we wanted to make the film, really. Yeah. I mean, beyond talking about almost making a kind of like a superhero film and something that was immersive and a real journey and all those things that were built into this incredible story. Yeah. But it was also because we kind of felt there was an opportunity that if in watching the film, just as we were sort of changed by our experience of making it, you could give that to an audience as well. And I think that's that happens every Paralympics, but it's wonderful to be able to put that into a film storytelling format.
I think that is an absolutely wonderful way to wrap up our dialogue here, because that is exactly right. When you can walk away looking at things differently and thinking about things differently and asking yourself, what can I do to make life better? Then something has happened. And you, Peter and Ian, both have been able to do that with Rising Phoenix. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate the work, and just want to give you a chance to say any final thoughts or final words about this film that you would like audiences to know.
I mean, it's been a really tough year for a lot of people, and a lot of, mentally everyone is drained, and not only the people, especially the people on the front line, but not only the people on the front line. I hope, and I'm sure Peter would agree with me, I hope Rising Phoenix is a sort of angle of the human spirit. You might not be into sports, you might be, I don't know, you might be a bit worried to watch people with a disability for whatever reason. It's not something that you put on your radar for many reasons. But a lot of the amazing comments I've heard is just like, it is such a transcendently positive and moving and powerful film. Sounds really wanky coming from one of the makers. At least the bits that Peter is responsible of. But, it's just a good film to watch right now. You could say it's not a film that, it's not a small tiny story. It's big, but I think the world needs to be big again. And with the big, terrible events that are happening in the world, politically, socially, with a disease, this really show you. And I really hope Tokyo can happen next year. It just really brings the best of humankind together. And I think we just need a bit of that.
Well, this film, Rising Phoenix, is one that transcends genre. It transcends documentary, and it is magnificent. And Peter and Ian, thank you so much for your time. And I do encourage those out there to take the time to watch this if you have not. Rising Phoenix, well worth the effort and well worth whatever time you can give it.
It's on Netflix.
Exactly.
That's it. Peter and Ian, thank you so much for joining us right here on Meet Me at the Movies Open Dialogue, and for all those spending time with us, whether that's through the visual medium or through our radio broadcast. We appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Noel T. Manning II, and that is a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
having us.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you.